Back to work. A judge makes a ruling in the case between CNN and the White House. Religious freedom. A Catholic bishop in China is arrested. We have reaction from the Vatican. A ray of hope. An update in the case of Austin Tice. And from slave to priest. During Black Catholic History Month, a one-man play tells the story of Father Augustus Tolton. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, November 16th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. Getting back to work. A judge rules CNN's Jim Acosta is allowed back at the White House, at least temporarily. Last week, the Trump administration took away his credential. Acosta says he's pleased by the decision.
I want to thank all of my colleagues in the press who supported us this week, and I want to thank the judge for the decision he made today. And let's go back to work. Thank you.
Acosta lost his press pass after clashing with the president in a news conference. The White House says it's working on new rules to make sure there's a fair and orderly question and answer session. Amber Athey of the Daily Caller joins me now. She's also written for CatholicVote.org. Amber, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So today, Jim Acosta temporarily is allowed back into the White House. How do you think this will impact others covering the White House?
I imagine that the reporters would want to operate in a more fair and orderly fashion to prevent this kind of circus from happening again. I think all of this was really just a distraction where a reporter made himself the news story instead of covering the news, and ultimately it went to court. But if you look at the White House's statement in response to this ruling, they noted that the judge only made an argument about the Fifth Amendment right to due process in this case and thought that the White House was not fair in the way that they revoked Acosta's pass, and not necessarily that they weren't able to do so in the first place. So the White House will likely implement these processes and procedures for if they choose to revoke passes in the future, hopefully to prevent any future lawsuits.
So do you think there will be future revocations of credentials?
If I had to guess, I would say that the White House is going to give Acosta another chance. I don't think they're going to pursue this specific lawsuit any further, but the next time that Acosta acts anywhere out of line, I think they will try to take his pass away again, but they will do so through some kind of official process that they've lined out in order to prevent this Fifth Amendment due process argument.
So Amber, one of the things that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is talking about is laying out these rules, these guidelines for their press conferences. I mean, what can come of that? What do you think these rules? What do you think is going to be in those rules?
Yeah, it's interesting. My guess is based on the reasons that they did revoke Acosta's pass in the first place, which were things like shouting out of turn, getting more than the normal 2 questions that are normally allotted to a reporter, having a debate with the president as opposed to actually asking specific questions. I would imagine all of those things might be included in a process for the White House or rules for White House reporters. And any reporter that tries to seek a hard pass to White House grounds will have to abide by those rules or they risk losing that pass.
But isn't this going to be seen in some way as an attempt to silence tough questions?
It will, but I think there's a real distinct difference between asking tough questions, which a reporter absolutely should do. Our reporters do it all the time in the White House briefing room. There's a difference between that and then trying to actually have a debate with the president, which if you watch that press conference, what Jim Acosta did was he opened his line of questioning with saying that he wanted to challenge the president and then basically had a debate with him about what his definition of invasion was. And you hear the president respond to Jim Acosta by saying, we have a difference of opinion. So that's not really the role of a journalist to go in there with an opinion and try to debate the president on it. Tough questions should be encouraged, they should be allowed, and those are ultimately 2 different things.
So this case will be working its way through the courts. So this isn't the end of the story, but thank you very much, Amber Athey from the Daily Caller. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
And the caravan of nearly 2,000 Central American asylum seekers reached Tijuana, Mexico. They could be delayed there for months. Some journey into the U.S. talk about their faith. Migrants fill Tijuana streets, looking on as workers secure the border with razor wire. And armed agents stand guard. But it's not all calm. Mexico! Tensions are rising between Mexican locals and the Central Americans who have arrived in the border town.
No son bienvenidos en este país, fuera
The bulk of the main caravan is still about 350 miles from the U.S. Mexico has offered refuge, asylum, and work visas. The U.S. bishops call for compassion. They say the Catholic Church will continue to serve, accompany, and assist all those who flee persecution, regardless of where they seek such protection and where they are from. To combat migrants trying to enter illegally, President Trump ordered more than 7,000 active duty troops to deploy to the U.S.-Mexican border. Earlier this week, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis defended that decision.
We determined that the mission was absolutely legal, and this was also reviewed by Department of Justice lawyers. It's obviously a moral and ethical mission to support our border patrolmen.
At the busiest border crossing in San Diego, only about 100 asylum claims are processed a day. So migrants are in for a wait of weeks or even months. In La Concha, Mexico, Marietta from Honduras says she believes she'll make it to the U.S. She says she has faith in God, and for him, there are no borders. The founder of WikiLeaks might be facing U.S. criminal charges. Julian Assange's name appears in an unsealed court filing on an unrelated case. In it, prosecutors twice reference charges against Assange. It's not immediately clear what accusations the WikiLeaks founder faces. Ohio's House passes a pro-life bill. It would ban abortions once a baby's heartbeat is detected. That could be as early as 6 weeks. The heartbeat bill now heads to the state Senate. Back in 2016, Republican Governor John Kasich vetoed the same bill. The United States fails to weaken references to sexual and reproductive health rights in a United Nations resolution. The language was part of a measure to end forced child marriages. The Trump administration wanted to add the phrase, in accordance with national laws. China and many Islamic countries supported that White House proposal. Almost half of Northern California's deadly wildfire has been contained. The blaze killed 63 people and destroyed the town of Paradise. More than 600 are still missing. Hundreds of people are combing through the rubble, searching for human remains. A Chilean cardinal is stepping down as one of the Pope's advisors. Cardinal Francisco Javier Errázuriz is the retired Archbishop of Santiago. He served as a member of the Council of Nine Cardinals, known as the C9, for 5 years. He says it's not a resignation, but the end of his term. The cardinal has been linked to the sex abuse crisis in Chile. A Chinese bishop is arrested. He's refusing to join the state's official church controlled by the communist government. Asia News reports that Bishop Peter Zhouzumin disappeared several days ago. Pope Francis appointed him in 2016, posting him to Wenzhou, a city in southeastern China with a large Christian community. Vatican correspondent Juliet Linley joins us from Rome. Juliet, what happened to this bishop?
Jason, according to Asia News, Bishop Shao was subjected to dozens of days of indoctrination by communist officials. It's not clear to us where he is being held, and today Chinese officials said they had no knowledge of his situation. A spokeswoman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry offered no information. All she would say is that Beijing hopes for better ties with the Holy See. Asia News tells us they fear the bishop won't be freed in time for Christmas and is being kept from his pastoral work.
Now, this disappearance comes after the Holy See made a deal with China.
That's right, Jason. That deal regarding the appointment of bishops in September was controversial. Critics say the Vatican caved in to the ruling Communist Party just as it is waging a sweeping crackdown on religion. Others say it was an imperfect but much needed step towards uniting Catholics in the world's most populous country. And the Vatican has long hoped to bring together China's 12 million Catholics who, Jason, as we know, are divided. And some Catholics worship in state-sanctioned churches, others belong to the underground church run by bishops and priests who are loyal to Rome and the Pope. They're frequently detained and harassed.
What else can you tell us about this sweeping crackdown on religion in China?
Jason, under President Xi Jinping, who is also the leader of the Communist Party, the authorities have clamped down heavily in recent months on Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, and Buddhists, and it's been done in the name of national security and making foreign religion conform to Chinese communist culture. Now, the Catholic Church and the Communist Chinese government had they've had a rocky relationship. China broke off relations with the Holy See in 1951, and after the officially atheist Communist Party took power and established its own church. All religions were harshly persecuted during the rule of Chairman Mao, but after his death in '76, Jason, religion has continued to grow in recent years despite the party's efforts to rein the religious in.
Wow. Very, very interesting and very sad developments here. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Funeral prayers at an Istanbul mosque for killed Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi. The funeral prayers were offered in absentia since the Washington Post columnist's body has not been found. He was killed last month inside the Saudi consulate in Turkey. The prayers come a day after Saudi Arabia said it would seek the death penalty against 5 men suspected of the killing. Pope Francis made a surprise visit today to a free mobile health clinic in St. Peter's Square. The Holy Father met patients, doctors, and volunteers. The clinic is free and will serve anyone who needs health care. Life returns to normal at a refugee camp in Bangladesh for Rohingya Muslims. Government officials have postponed plans to send the minority group back to Myanmar. Hundreds crowded into a mosque for Friday prayers. More than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims had fled Myanmar since 2017. Senator Rand Paul says he has spoken with the president about offering asylum to Asia Bibi. Bibi is a Catholic mother of 5. Pakistan's Supreme Court last month acquitted her of blasphemy charges. She's in hiding, fearing for her safety. For more on Bibi, visit the National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. They also tell us why Pakistani Catholics are keeping quiet about her landmark acquittal. Coming up, President Trump presents the highest award civilians can receive. Thanks for watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. The U.S. government says a missing American journalist is still alive. Austin Tice disappeared in Syria in 2012. President Trump last month helped get the release of an American pastor detained in Turkey. Now our White House team is asking what is being done for Austin. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Jason, a top State Department official tells me President Trump has an unwavering commitment to getting U.S. hostages back home, including Austin Tice. This week, we were briefed on his case, and though it's been 6 years since Austin went missing, his family and government officials are prayerfully optimistic.
And it's now long past time for his captors to allow Austin to come home.
Robert O'Brien speaking this week at the National Press Club. The special presidential envoy is trying to free nearly 20 Americans held hostage overseas, including Austin Tice.
I want to make it very clear that the United States government believes that Austin Tice is alive.
Tice disappeared on August 14, 2012, after covering the conflict in Syria. That's where investigators believe the American journalist is still being held.
Frequent intimidation, arrests, abductions, and murders constitute a horrendous environment for the media.
Margot Ewan from Reporters Without Borders calls Syria one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. She says nearly 200 have been killed since Austin was abducted.
Our greatest desire is to bring Austin home.
Mark Tice is Austin's father. He and his wife Deborah are relying on their Catholic faith as they wait to see their son again. And they've met with President Trump, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and other top officials to keep Austin's case alive.
Why haven't we heard the president publicly speak out for Austin Tice? And would the president speaking out draw more attention to this case and hopefully help secure his release?
So, there's been no president in my lifetime that has been committed or as successful to bringing Americans home, unjustly detained Americans home, without paying concessions than President Trump.
O'Brien says the U.S. won't barter for American hostages. Instead, he tells me he relies on a greater power.
I personally believe, as a person of faith, that prayer has an important role in these situations.
We believe thousands and thousands, if not millions, of people out there praying for us, praying for Austin. And we feel that. We also believe Austin feels that.
Mark tells me he and his wife are already planning another trip to the Middle East. They want to try to reach out to those holding Austin captive.
Won't it be great if he's home for Thanksgiving? Want to be great if he's home for Christmas.
Despite the years that have passed, the Tice family remains optimistic.
Our level of hope doesn't ever waver. I mean, we are constantly hopeful.
Fellow journalists are helping coordinate a night out for Austin Tice on May 2nd next year. They hope participating restaurants will donate half their venue to the Austin Tice Fund. The money will be used to increase the reward leading to his safe return, and that's on top of the $1 million reward the FBI has already offered. Jason?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. President Trump awards the Medal of Freedom to 7 people, including the late Justice Antonin Scalia. It's the country's highest civilian honor.
Universally admired for his towering intellect, brilliant wit, and fierce devotion to our founding principles, Justice Scalia has made a deep and lasting impact on the history of our nation.
One of Justice Scalia's children is now a priest. Father Paul Scalia says his father not only revered the Constitution, but also the Catholic Church. Father Scalia says he's honored by today's award, but what would his dad think?
He would be making light of it. He would probably say it's no big deal, but then at the end he would be greatly honored and by it.
President Trump also awarded the Medal of Freedom to the late Elvis Presley and Babe Ruth, former football player Roger Staubach, former State Supreme Court Justice Alan Page, Senator Orrin Hatch, and Miriam Alderson, a doctor and philanthropist. Her award drew criticism because she's married to one of the nation's largest Republican donors. Up next, what's next for the U.S. bishops after their annual meeting in Baltimore? And a one-man play just in time for Black Catholic History Month. Glad to have you join us tonight. I'm Jason Calvi in for Lauren Ashburn. Tonight we bring you a surprising response from a survivor of clergy sex abuse. James Grain went public this summer after he described nearly 2 decades of abuse by Archbishop Theodore McCarrick.
He's a sad, weak man who has lost his faith in Jesus Christ. I pray for him every day. He needs to be removed from the priesthood. He needs to be taken to a place where he can see the damage that he has done.
Grain revealed his full name to the public for the very first time earlier this week. He sat down with our Wyatt Goolsby. Be sure to tune in on Monday to EWTN News Nightly for our one-on-one. James tells us he thinks the U.S. bishops and their handling of the sex abuse crisis and reflects on all of that. Now, Dr. Matthew Bunson, senior editor for the National Catholic Register, as well as senior contributor to EWTN, thanks for being with us. We just heard that very, very powerful testimony from James Grain. He says that Archbishop Theodore McCarrick should be removed from the priesthood. Is that going to happen?
Well, that's the question now. The case, the scandal of Theodore McCarrick rests in so many ways at the very dark heart of the current crisis we're looking at because there are so many questions attached to it. We don't know exactly where the process is canonically in dealing with him. The investigators have come from Rome. We know that they have visited a couple of the dioceses or archdioceses that he's related to, places like Newark. We know that a trial is likely at some point in the future, but we don't know the results of that. And coming out of the USCCB meeting this week in Baltimore, the failure even to pass a symbolic measure encouraging the Holy See to release a documentation relating to this case has only exasperated the disappointment and even the anger of a lot of Catholics and many of the victims.
Why, you were part of that, you watched the debate as it was happening on the floor of the General Assembly in Baltimore. Why did they shoot that down? It was just a symbolic gesture, as you mentioned.
That whole debate indicates just how divided this conference is in many ways on how to proceed, not just with the McCarrick scandal, but also with holding bishops accountable. How are they going to be held responsible for the failures of other bishops? We had 2 proposals, for example. One was to outsource, basically, to create a third-party reporting system. The other was to kind of keep the structure the way it is right now through the metropolitan bishops, in other words, the archbishops of a region. Both of those are hotly contested. Both of those are major questions, canonically, even theologically. And that's one of the reasons why Rome itself declined or asked the bishops not to vote on these different proposals right now. all eyes are turning to February, when Pope Francis is bringing the heads of Episcopal conferences from around the world. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, will be there. And he has to be representing the concerns, not just of the U.S. bishops, but all of the laity, priests, everyone in the Church of the United States, but above all, the victims, as we've just heard from James Crane.
And what exactly will be the message that Cardinal DiNardo did hear from the bishops? Did he hear from victims that spoke to them as well this week?
One of the things that he's taking with him is the genuine concern on the part of so many bishops that we have to solve this crisis. That means we have to solve the McCarrick scandal. We have to find a way of holding bishops accountable. But we also have to make sure that victims are held uppermost in our minds as we try to deal with this crisis. So he's bringing not just those concerns, but also that anger, understandable as it is, of so many lay people who themselves want to see action, but who also want to be participants in the process of reform. And one of the questions that we ask is, what can lay people do? Well, part of it is we have to be holier ourselves, but we also have to encourage our bishops spiritually and to stand up and speak courageously. A number of bishops did at the Bishops' Conference meeting in Baltimore. I think especially of Archbishop Cordileone of San Francisco, or Bishop Strickland of Tyler, Texas. Give them the courage to speak up, give them the courage to demand answers to so many questions that are still there about Archbishop McCarrick.
Well, Dr. Bunson, thank you so much for joining us and sharing those reflections as we look back at this monumental week for the United States Church. Thank you very much.
Let's keep praying.
Thank you. And Pope Francis praises a medieval order that helps Christians in the Holy Land. The Holy Father met members of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre. He thanked them for their work. Their leader, Cardinal Edwin O'Brien, says the group plays a key role in promoting dialogue.
The Order of the Holy Sepulchre is very much involved in every aspect of life in the Church in the Holy Land. It's ecumenically involved. It's involved with the Muslims very intimately.
The order was founded in Jerusalem and dates back to the 12th century. It currently has around 40,000 members, known as knights and dames. Next month, the church will beatify 19 Algerian martyrs. The leader of the church in Algiers says they're models for present-day Catholics. Archbishop Pia Clarveri was killed with 18 others in the 1990s. Beatification puts them one step away from sainthood. The country's current archbishop says it's a grace for Algeria, which is 99% Muslim. He urges the faithful to follow the same path of witness as the martyrs. And finally tonight, in honor of Black Catholic History Month, a new play details the life of a man who went from slave to priest.
It was a promised land. Oh God, you answered our prayers and delivered us out of Egypt safely through the Red Sea.
Father Augustus Tolton was the first African-American Catholic priest in the United States. His cause for sainthood is moving forward. The production opens tonight in Alexandria, Virginia, and will tour the country. The one-man play stars actor Jim Coleman. All of us at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching this week. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.